I think one of the biggest things has been really interesting to see what is fully transferable from, a smaller seller to one where, we have some severe advantages. And I think that most severe of those is actually around how we have invested in logistics specifically and how we move stuff around the world a little bit better than anybody else.
One, two, three.
Welcome to the Smartest Amazon Seller Podcast. I know, are going to get real nerdy and we're going to make you pretty smart today. We're going to talk about, I almost would argue, the issue of 2024 when it comes to what people like to talk about and think about, and actually sometimes not think about. I have with me this person has worked inside of an Amazon fulfillment center. He thinks about optimization of fulfillment networks, some very complex things. I think he's going to correct me as soon as I say his name, but we got many years there, and is now head of transportation with Pattern. So super large seller. He thinks about their logistics. That's what he thinks about at night. I've got Rob Hahn. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
What did I get wrong there? So how many years at Amazon?
I was 8 years at Amazon. So I started as an intern and then left as a general manager. Yep.
And then your title?
I'm the COO. So I'm Chief Operations Officer at Pattern.
Well, the way that the conversations that we've had in the past makes me just think that all you think about is transportation and logistigoing. So
I do think about that a lot. You're not wrong. I do other stuff, but also spend a lot of time on transportation.
Okay. Well, we're going to take a departure from, a lot of times on this podcast, we talk about, launch strategies, marketing, PPC. We're going to pretend that's last year's subjects. This right now, it's been kind of a big issue. It's been a hot button. Amazon's been under fire. They've even backpedaled a few of their announcements. We're talking about the inbound placement fee, low inventory fees. It's been a hot topic, and you've jumped into it. And Pattern, such a huge seller that certainly a fee change for you guys is a 7-figure change. And I assume some of those, you just have to absorb them, and then others you try and optimize around. So okay, I've set the stage. Well, just tell me a bit more about your background and how, Yeah,
absolutely. So I started my career at Amazon. I went to a small school outside Fort Wayne, Indiana called Huntington University. I really don't know how I found my way into Amazon. I knew a guy who started the internship program. So I was in Amazon's first internship program ever for undergrads. And I just kind of got hooked. I was a small business major.
Yeah.
Amazon is not, but this is 2010. So this is like Amazon.com.
Did they fly you out to Seattle for that internship?
No, I was in Indianapolis. But this is early Amazon still. In many ways, I went back to school after my interview, and one of my friends was like, Amazon, this is Amazon.com, right? It wasn't just Amazon. And my friend in college at the time was like, what's Amazon? I've never heard of that, which is an obscenely crazy idea now. No, but this is pretty early on. Amazon's doing, $20-ish billion in top line, and FBA really hadn't taken off, all of that. So I got in very early, did the internship, got hooked. Amazon was very entrepreneurial at the time.
So, anytime someone is in a fulfillment center, I'm like, okay, these are the Amazon employees that roll up their sleeves versus the Amazon employees that sit behind a desk.
Yeah, I didn't have a desk. I was on concrete all of the time.
Okay.
And honestly, it was an incredibly good experience. Amazon gets good press, bad press, all of those things, but some of the smartest people in the world, hardest problems. I started there, and then I worked up very quickly. So I ended up being able to work on stuff like, outbound processes. I helped build and kind of test some of our first inbound automation, which now all of, a huge percentage of our cartons that you send into Amazon goes through. I moved in the robotics space in 2015. Amazon acquired Kiva Robotics. I was in one of the first, it's now Amazon Robotics. I was in one of the first Kiva buildings to launch and figure out how the heck do we actually make all of the things work, right? With the Amazon world.
It actually took a few years. I mean, I was trying to pay attention when they made that acquisition. So like a full rollout wasn't just like an overnight
Oh,
thing.
it was kind of a
Um,
nightmare. And the first few
yeah.
buildings that they launched, they actually thought it was so different. They didn't actually involve any operators that knew how to run the Amazon side of the machine, if that makes sense.
Uh-huh.
So they ended up when our building launched, they ended up taking some of the better operators. I was fortunate enough to be chosen in that group. Like, hey, let's try to get some people that know how to run the thing. And so we ended up just having a stellar launch. This is outside Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's MK1 for those that are familiar with the Amazon nomenclature. So I started that building
Yeah.
as a inbound senior operations manager. Just a really cool time though. So I got to move into robotics. Really had no idea what was going on. So got to launch a building there, and then I ended up spending 2 years in that building, and then getting promoted then to be an executive. So LA to the Amazon, running a big Amazon robotics fulfillment center. I moved to Baltimore, and got to. It was a really unique experience. These are like it's kind of like mayor of a town, right? I've got 6,000 people. We're doing a 1 million square foot building, million units in and out a day, just these giant, like unbelievably. And I was very young. I mean, I look pretty young still, but I was like, 27 or something like that, running this giant building, and just a really unique, very cool. I'm very
Uh-huh.
fortunate for people.
What year would that be?
That was 2017.
Okay.
So yeah, 2017, I took on the building in Baltimore. So that
Yeah.
was, and that's where I ended my time at Amazon. I left there and joined a startup, very small startup called Whitebox as the chief operating officer. It was a kind of e-commerce first 3PL as well as services. We kind of were trying to solve this problem. Brands would have to sell stuff and you got to move stuff, and we kind of were trying to do both. So how do we help ads, content, listings, et cetera, as like an agency? And then on the move stuff side, let's be a 3PL that can do D2C, marketplaces, and B2B, et
Mhm.
cetera. So I did that for 4 years. And then I joined the Pattern team as the COO. So I lead global logistics. And I joined in August of 2022. So that's
Okay.
kind of been my path to here.
Yeah. And I think a lot of listeners, when Pattern gets talked about, they perk up like, oh, this is our new punching bag of the world, because everyone knows who's the big dog and wants to formulate contrarian opinions. Some of them probably valid. It's interesting. So I think, your perspective will be, like listened to, like, okay, what are the problems that you guys think about and are working through? Just jump into some of the things that like you think about with like, running Pattern, and like the logistics side.
Yeah, I think it's been a very interesting experience. So, at Whitebox, I spent a lot of time. We were a pretty large seller. We worked with a lot of decently sized sellers as well. And then coming to Pattern, which, like you said, it's kind of like the the biggest, all of the things. It's been a really interesting experience to see the things that transfer exactly the same. Like, it doesn't matter if you're a small seller or a big seller. Some stuff is exactly identical. And that's true of not just the logistics side. It's like, you still have to fight Amazon. We don't get like special treatment on a bunch of small, like we still got to put tickets in. We got to do all those things. So there's a lot of commonalities between, what we're doing and what a smaller seller, somebody just getting started out has to deal with. The advantage, I think, it's what's been really interesting, especially from a logistics side, is we're moving physical products, right? And we made a decision before I came on at Pattern to take in and do the logistics ourselves, build our own software. We use a homegrown WMS, we use a homegrown OMS, right? So we build our own stuff because there's not really something out there in the market that can do all the things we need it to do, as well as our network. We're able to just push a lot of volume through, and having control of that's really important. And I say this phrase pretty regularly, that volume pays for a multitude of sins. And we have a lot of that. I mean, we're doing tens of millions of units through our network, where sellers don't get that advantage. So we get this density that allows us to do a lot. And we also get resources, right? So I've got, dozens of developers working on our WMS. I've spent millions of dollars in hardware and software in our facilities to be able to scale up, and be able to handle some of the complexity. So I think one of the biggest things has been really interesting to see what is fully transferable from a smaller seller, to one where, we have some severe advantages. And I think that most severe of those is actually around how we have invested in logistics specifically and how we move stuff around the world a little bit better than anybody else.
Uh-huh. Now, there's a lot of different directions we could go on that. Is how different is the US from like some of the international stuff?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, so I lead global ops, and we're kind of all over the place, right? So we're a pretty large seller in each of these markets. We've got a building in the UK, for example. We've got a building in Poland, Australia. We're in Asia. We're in each of the major markets that we're in. Some of the differences are pretty dramatic. I mean, from a logistics and transportation standpoint, there's a lot of similarities. I'd say if I start with similarities, a lot of the software can work the same. So I've invested a ton of my time in how do we build products and software that can be homogenous anywhere, right? I've got small facilities in Poland or the UK that do, a tenth of the volume I'm going to do somewhere else. Well, how do I make a piece of software that can scale up and use the same type of interaction? So we use Amazon's APIs a lot. We're a heavy user of Amazon's APIs.
Here's the question. You guys have your own like warehouse management system, WMS, that you said. Do you have to localize it in other languages?
Yeah. So one of the actually really cool things that we've done is we have multi-language support for all the different areas that we're in. So we've been able to do that. Actually, even in our Hebron, so our biggest facility is in Hebron, Kentucky. And that facility is a pretty decent population of not speaking English as their first language. So Spanish is a very heavy spoken language there. And so we've got a support system, but also all of our software operates fully in Spanish, in Polish, in English. And so, yeah, we do it all.
That's interesting. That's a challenge that I had not thought about. But Hebron is kind of like your HQ there for
the warehouse perspective.
For the US. You do what a lot of other Amazon sellers do, and like stuff needs to get processed specifically to match like Amazon's requirements, whether that's prep, whether that's bundling and kitting, or if that's just routing the shipments with like the right labels and the right stuff. I had a chance to actually like interact with you guys' software, and it actually reminded me. This was a problem that I worked on about 8 years ago when I was growing up as an Amazon seller.
Yeah.
And I actually glossed over a few things. Like we never built like a receiving side to, and that created some accounting problems. We're not,
you're probably not alone there.
If something arrived incorrectly, like we didn't actually solve that ever. Right. But things really started to be very familiar to me, the way that we would collect, products together, process that, prep them, little notes. So, I mean, it was cool to kind of see what you guys had built and that it was very clean. I was a software developer of one and tried to do my best. I mean, it worked. Like it was used by 100 employees in our Amazon business, but let's like jump a little bit to 2024. How's pattern adapting, at scale to some of these like new things that kind of Amazon threw at you?
Yeah, it's been an interesting year for everybody. I think so. I joined in 2022, and I led an overhaul with my team of rebuilding our software kind of from the ground up. Physical processes, hardware, software, automation, what have you. We really made a change in investment. One of the major changes we made is we actually, before Amazon made us, we didn't ever send to just one facility. So it's been an interesting thing to watch. We create small batches of shipments instead of big batches of shipments.
Yeah.
Which is hard for someone that doesn't have scale and density, right? If you're just a small seller, you're like, I want to ship to one building because the physical space, the requirements, the labels, the full truckload. But if you get beyond a full truckload, you actually have the ability to say, I kind of don't care where it goes as much, because at the end state is if I can get closer to end customers, I'm probably going to have better speed, and that speed is better conversion, better ad effectiveness, better organic rate eventually, right? Because it's gonna feeds into that machine of sales.
Mhm.
So we actually went the path back in early 2023. We made some foundational change to our software where we started making small batches and shipping to more facilities. So we were already shipping to a lot of facilities.
Mhm.
Now we started going to more and farther facilities on March 1, right? When all of this change went in 2024. But we actually had foundationally already believed that Amazon was with doing the one shipment idea is not necessarily the best for your brand. Because here's the way this works at Amazon. I'm not sure how far we want to dive. We could probably spend a lot of time
This is
talking about
exactly what I want to hear.
all right, great.
Um,
So Amazon has 22 cross docks in their network. And a cross dock for standard size items, right? If it's an oversized, they don't have cross docks. It's why it's so expensive and you end up shipping a lot directly to fulfillment centers. But they've got cross docks and fulfillment centers. But these 22 cross docks, essentially, there's so many fulfillment centers now that not any one of them is connected to all the fulfillment centers. So you split these into regions, right? So let's say, we're in Hebron, Kentucky. So let's say we send to Indy 9 in Indianapolis. Indy 9 is not connected to every fulfillment center. So what that means is you're not going to get to every localization where people are going to buy things.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't get that next day, that same day delivery speed that has such an impact on sales, right? That's a proven fact. You can see it anywhere you look that it has an increase on conversion and improved ad effect.
I will say especially now as like a dad, when we go on traveling, like things happen or like, if I could get this tonight, I'm just going to do it. Like, no question.
Absolutely. Like my own personal buying behavior is I kind of hate waiting more than a day for anything at this point. I mean, like I know I'm kind of the worst at that on Amazon. I don't expect that from everything, but I expect it from Amazon at this point. So basically as we said originally, we are going to already build this where I'm going to send to as many cross docks as Amazon. I'm going to let Amazon's placement do its thing. So from the very beginning, we said, let's try to build that. So over the last 18 months, we've been on a journey of doing that. We kind of took this on where we said, okay, we're going to spend $0 on an inbound placement fee. We're never going to pay an inbound placement fee. And what's going to happen? So we've been able to absorb it severely more gracefully than I think anybody else because we've been able to say, we've already got these veins into across the world.
I'm curious. This is the first time I think I've spoken with someone maybe in years that really understands like cross dock versus like a fulfillment center. What happens? So I guess most shipments go to cross docks.
For standard shipments as a third party seller, almost 0% of them will go to a fulfillment center. Okay. If you're like shipping small parcel or I've got 10 items that you're shipping, they might be like, okay, send that to BWI2 in Baltimore.
Will a cross dock technically, they receive the product? Like, it gets marked as received?
Yeah. So the way that the cross docks work there, right? And this is true of like any marketplace that you do. Walmart does it similarly if you're going to do it through a cross dock, and like we'll end up going that way in the world, but a cross dock will receive the units for the first time and then they will split it out. And so Amazon's inventory placement algorithms will say, I want 2 of these over here. So you send in a carton, they'll end up saying, I want that entire carton to go somewhere. Or I want you to stop and break that into pieces and put those in yellow totes, and those yellow totes then will split out. So I'm sending in 24 items. So if I'm sending in 1,000, I might say, okay, take a box and send it to each fulfillment center. Or if I'm sending in 100 in one box, I need to split that up. So that's what happens at the cross dock. It's the initial receive. And then from there, virtually it's tracked at every single move across from there.
One time someone kind of went made a post about like, hey, I sent a product from Texas to New York, only for that cross dock to send it back to a different fulfillment center in Texas.
100% happens.
And all of a sudden, alarms go off, like what's going on? You guys promised me this was for efficiency. Doesn't look efficient to me. And, but there's complexity inside these cross docks.
Incredibly. I think one of the guys on my team used to run North American supply chain for Amazon. Mm-hmm. And he says a phrase, and he actually may have said this to you when we were talking. Yeah. And it basically is like, don't confuse, stupidity with complexity, right? There's other words.
No. So I said that phrase, but I used not complexity. I used don't assume malice that can be easily explained by stupidity. I said stupidity, and then like he's like,
Correct.
oh,
Yeah,
he's like, no, complexity.
yeah,
And
that's fair.
and
It's
that's
not.
actually well, what's great about that, I don't know, makes Amazon look a little bit more sympathetic, because like it is just very complex algorithms that are re-optimizing every other day or every day, like what's the needs now, and they change.
Yeah. And actually one of the most, like, I ran inbound at Amazon for years, or like I was an
Mm.
inbound leader. And one of the major things we have to manage is our backlog. That's like how much stuff is sitting in my yard that needs to be pulled in and processed in my building. And that changes dramatically. Like when someone said, I think that needs to go from Texas to New York, they said they thought a couple things. Well, maybe they actually wanted it in Texas, but the Texas cross docks were blown out. So if they have a backlog of millions of units sitting in their yard, the fastest way to actually get it to Texas is to send it to New York and then back to Texas.
Does Amazon use the rail network?
So sometimes they use the rail network, absolutely. So they'll use rail. They have so much, and they use less and less of it now because they own so much of their on the road trucking.
Yeah.
That as they've expanded that, it's less than I believe. I mean, I've been there in a few years now, but that transition had started happening. Yeah, they use the rail. So like honestly, the fastest and cheapest way might be actually sending it to New York and back to Texas, and that might be a backlog situation in Texas, or to your point, demand has changed. It takes 10 days to get from A to B, and people in Texas have started, we ran out in Texas because people went there. So when I told you that I needed to go to New York 7 days ago, that's not true anymore. And I need to send it back to Texas. Yeah. So also I'm not defending him. Amazon could also be wrong. So this is a black box for them too. Sometimes you throw something in the machine and you expect one thing to happen. They also need to measure actual results and see what that is. So yeah. It's super complex, and they got to figure it out. It's their job to figure it out. Like they need to do better, but it is super complex.
Okay. So before I had even met you, I saw that like Pattern announced like marketplace prep services, and I think it was a big surprise, for someone like for Pattern's probably just like always focused on selling, right? And like it's easy to be in that lane than to like, okay, like open this up to third-party sellers or brands that might need help. What's kind of like some of your guys' thinking, like what led to that decision, and how is it evolving?
Yeah, it's a good question. When I kind of came with this idea that I think so many times in this like 3P seller space, we kind of feel like we're competing a lot. And I think that's an odd thing. Like, I think the reality is Amazon can't solve all of our problems. We don't want them to try to solve all of our problems. And I think it really started with, I like solving really hard problems. And I've built a really great team. We've invested a bunch of money in the capacity. And so I'm sitting here and I'm like, I have this like almost AWS, right? If you think about the story of AWS, it's like, all right, I built something that's really interesting for myself. And now it's not a problem if other people, even some of my competitors, use that, ride the rails there that we've already built, because it's kind of better for everybody. Because I get more density for transportation. I get more leverage on my fixed costs. I get more transactions. So it's interesting. I learn more about how to do this thing better. And on the other side, people get faster, they get better, they get cheaper to do the thing that they're already trying to do. So at the end of the day, that was my bet. My bet is, I think it'd be interesting. We are the best at this. Like I can say that so confidently. We do more, we do it faster, we do it better. And so being able to sell that as a service, I don't feel like I'm competing with anybody. It's just riding the rails of investing.
I could hit the competition on one thing is like, there's over 50,000 sellers that do over $1 million on Amazon. So think of yourself in a big stadium, 50,000, person stadium. You're probably competitive with like 5 people there.
Right.
Like,
I agree 100%.
There's a few people out there. Maybe you are competitive with them, but like the vast majority, you're actually not. And because Amazon is like 40,000 submarkets as opposed to like one big marketplace. So exactly. I've always been very transparent and like the competition, like, yeah, sure. Sometimes but it's actually way less than you think.
I agree 100%. It's just way less.
It's a huge ocean. And I think the AWS comparison is obviously well understood, And I think this kind of hits like the nail on the head of like Rob and I spoke in the first place was you guys were offering this, some prep services or FBA inbounding services to anyone interested. And now you have an additional leverage in being like, oh, also you're never going to see any inbound fees.
Yeah, and it honestly was we started this in January, basically saying, let's see if anyone's interested in using us to do the entire thing. I can do labeling. Well, actually, if you break it down, I can do D2C fulfillment too. We do, we run Shopify stores, we do FBM fulfillment. So I can do D2C fulfillment. I can do kind of create the marketplace prep and a new product here that we're coming out with in the next couple weeks here is middle mile. So marketplace prep is you send me your stuff, I'll label it, I'll bag it, I'll create multi-packs, variety packs, whatever you need to happen to get it ready to go to Amazon.
Yeah, into their seller account.
That's correct. Yeah, into anybody's seller account. We'll do all of that prep for you. We'll create the shipment automatically for you. All you do is send us the stuff, and then we take it from there. We end up creating the shipment. We get it on the truck to Amazon. You don't have to do anything else. We virtually and physically do everything that's required to get it into Amazon. And then we started talking about this change that happened. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, I'm going to pay 0 inbound placement fees. I was like, I'll bet you that people right now, if I was a seller that was sending 1 full truckload into Amazon a week, now I'm going to be sending 5 LTL shipments. Everything just got longer going in the network. Everything got harder. Everything just went up by 4 or 5 times in cost. And basically the idea was, I'll bet that even if you want to create your own shipments, if you want to do everything, if someone got to the point where they said, if I can just send to 1 location still and it gets into Amazon's network, that's really valuable and super easy for me. So we made the bet, hey, if other people want to do no inbound placement fees and still have the same ease that they had before of sending to one place, why not open up our logistics network, create more density, get more truckloads in. It's actually not worse for Amazon. Amazon loves it too, right? Because they don't have to do so many appointments. They get denser trucks coming in. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody.
Yeah. Now, there is one, you guys are all the way in Kentucky. So I think there's probably an East Coast lean.
We've got a Utah facility, and then we actually are also launching this year, which is announced here for the first time, actually. We're launching a Las Vegas facility. Goes online in Q3. Okay. So we're up right now, like lease signed. Yeah. It's happening actively right now. So we are going Hebron, Kentucky, and then we've got Vegas right now. But we're going to be able to do stuff like, think of stuff like zone skipping here, right? If I have shipments that need to go to the West Coast and you send them to Hebron, Kentucky, I can send them in a leg to Vegas and then get them to its end destination, California, faster and cheaper than any seller can do on their own. It's a guarantee because I'm sending along with tens of millions of other shipments and our units from me and from everybody else that we're already building in, right? So nobody's going to be able to beat that density. It's just impossible out there.
Interesting. I mean, that's one thing that I was surprised to hear was like that. You're like, oh, we'll do this for anyone, small sellers, large sellers. When I think of, the vast number of SKUs that are available on Amazon, there's like corner cases, things that like are awkward or hard. I think I even read once Amazon, maybe this like manager would go around to an FC and he'd look at the corners of the building and be like, oh, those are where the problems are. Cause they just like, they stow away their problems. What are some problems that like you guys are seeing, or maybe that you're like, oh crap, if someone ships us like awkward prep desks, like, maybe this product doesn't fit our model very well. I don't know. Like, what does that make?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely are optimized from a hardware, conveyance, software standpoint for standard shipments, standard size items in Amazon's network. We do have we're a large shipper of non-sort or like larger products on the Amazon as well. Those definitely are more unique, right? Like we are optimized for standard size items. That being said, we've got processes for non-sort. We can do those large non-sort, but we do have a limit on what we want and can do extremely well and process very well. Like it's an interesting thing. You kind of hear a lot of people go out and say, hey, I've got 20 million square feet. I've got 5 million square feet across the US of warehouse space. I want to have the least amount of concrete possible and do the most volume. Like I don't get like more excited about getting a 500,000 square foot warehouse. Like if I can do that same thing and I can do it in 300,000 square feet or 100,000 square feet, that's a giant win for me. So we focus on speed into us, but then through our building. Like, for example, if you sent me something, Scott, and you were like, hey, I've got 10,000 units that need to go into Amazon. Technically, you could drop it off at our door and it could be on a truck ready to go to Amazon in 45 minutes, fully prepped because of the way that we process these. It could be split, it could be labeled, it could be prepped, it could be bagged, it could be put in the next box, a label on the outside, and in the truck ready to go in 45 minutes. Like that speed is super important. And that speed comes mostly with standard products. The non-sort, we do slow down and it is more challenging because of what I said earlier. They don't have cross docks, right? You're going to go directly to the fulfillment center. So there is more of a split. And we kind of queue that up in order to help us get better density there.
What if like my mind just like goes there, like of like, oh, like when problems occur, like I'm sure some things have happened unexpected, like maybe like discrepancies, image discrepancies, or like incorrect products or UPCs, bundles, where I guess some communication needs to happen.
Yep.
How does that process look? I mean, like, or like in your dealing?
Yeah. So
I'm sure internally you guys have that a lot.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. What's nice about this is we're not just building a solution for somebody and like all of these things happen to us. So we've got already these teams and processes in place to chase down how do we go attack when these problems happen. We're not going to run into a problem we've never seen before. We've done too many SKUs. We've got tens of thousands of SKUs. We do millions and millions of units every single year. So we've run into everything you could possibly imagine. So just the experience makes this pretty easy. It's like, okay, this is the error. Here's what we need to do. And we've got really nice veins. Our customer service team is world class to be able to work with these brands to help them navigate what needs to happen either on their side, on our side. Problems happen, of course. I mean, you're moving physical things around the world, right? Problems happen.
Yeah.
But we've found ways to ride the rails of the infrastructure we've already got.
Okay. I've got a question. It's a little bit out of left field. I think what you guys have done, like Middle Mile, good name, interesting that like, you know, you're offering this kind of like this like lane into Amazon cross docking. Hopefully you guys help people save money. It matters. And actually it's a competitive edge. I've been studying a little bit about like, you know, Chinese sellers. We have this Temu. We have like the Amazon's a newly announced like Temu competitor. Who knows what that actually even looks like? It's kind of been leaked, but so we don't know any details. But one thing that who was writing about that is that like Chinese sellers, when they're shipping FBM in the US, they get it subsidized. I forgot the specific program. I think it's called ePacket. Do you know anything about that? You guys ever see that? Come across it?
No. I mean, so much of our volume goes FBA. We think FBA does give the best experience on the vast majority. Like it's about customer experience, right? Like Amazon, if nothing else, nailed that one. So we really haven't done a bunch. We do FBM, we support it. We can do it for 3PL. We do it on some of our larger stuff where it doesn't make sense to send it to Amazon and then. Do you guys do it with meltable stuff in the summer? We do it with meltable stuff. We do it with stuff like probiotics, and so we do cold ship. So those things that can't go in Amazon network. We do all of that ourselves as well. But generally, we're definitely FBA heavy. Like that FBA first, just from a customer experience and conversion standpoint, it's just is better.
Well, I guess like there's a lot of like, you know, different forces on the FBA program where, I mean, and Chinese obviously being one, like what are like, how do you see like, what's the next year looking like? What are some surprises you've seen with FBA, you know?
Yeah, I think, I've seen a lot. I mean, there's so much LinkedIn content, right? Like, I mean, you posted about this, about like, you know,
where's the people still working at Amazon? Where are those people that are LinkedIn influencers? Yeah. They're smart enough to stay quiet.
That's correct. But it's been interesting to watch people say like, oh my gosh, they're totally going to change this There's no way that they stick with these fees. I think what I'll tell you is, all right, for a second, forgive the big behemoth Amazon. What they're trying to do, although I think very poorly, is not wrong foundationally. And
Yeah.
that is get your stuff closer to the end customer because they're more likely to buy it then, right?
Mhm.
If speed is, they've got all of this data, we have a lot of this data, we can see this ourselves. Anybody who has the data can look at it and say, faster speeds, better conversion, period. The
Yeah.
concept of what they're trying to do is great. The
Yeah.
way they've executed, I think, is dramatic, like the way it was communicated, the way that it's
Yeah.
punitive, but I don't expect it to change because what they're
Yeah.
foundationally trying to do
Yeah.
will remain. So I think that what Amazon will try to do is help brands in some ways, but I think this is another sign where like brands, sellers, like you guys got to figure this out on your own.
Yeah.
Like they're not going to reach across much more than saying, how can I make this a little bit easier?
Yeah.
But I
I
don't
think
think there'll
sometimes
be
people
foundational changes.
I think sometimes people misunderstand what they're actually trying to solve. What they're trying to solve is not just your products, but millions of SKUs available nationwide.
That's right.
And, it's actually kind of hard to understand like what that actually means. Millions is like a crazy amount of
It's
unique products.
and
And
every million you go more increases the complexity not by 2x, it's
uh,
by 10x
yeah,
every time, right? When you double it, it's not twice as hard, it's 10 times as hard.
yeah, no, totally. Um, so, um, yeah, it's interesting as like, the last thing I wanted to talk about, which is actually, I still think misunderstood or like maybe not fully settled yet, is the low inventory fee. I think I saw a few numbers from some people and like, it's expensive.
It's expensive. It's going to be impactful. And I think you're right. I think Amazon kind of missed the mark on. So honestly, we actually, in the logic that they had done, we pointed out to Amazon that they
Yeah.
made an error in calculation in the beginning stages of this, and we luckily that was corrected. But I think they're still figuring it out. I
Yeah.
don't think that we've got our own algorithms and our own data science teams that are solving that problem. What is the right optimal level of inventory? So
Uh-huh.
like we have a very high in stock rate. We're super good at this, and I don't think Amazon knows yet what the right mark is. I think they went way too fast on that one. I think that
Yeah.
one could have potential to change. I just
Yeah.
don't know if they know
I,
yet what's
I,
the
no, I actually think it will. I think next year I
right.
would expect an update in either the weeks, or just the way that the program is like set up. I like some of the exclusions they put into, around stockouts. Sorry, seasonal stuff and
Yep.
low and slow moving stuff. It's like, okay, at least we got like, a few carve outs. Who knows if they even made those, if they did those correctly?
That's what I was just going to say. Like, how do you define a seasonal product? How do they know that your SKU and your
Yeah.
ASIN is like they can detect that? But if it's new SKU, I think the problem is every time you start a cut that might help, it adds to complexity. So then you have to
Yeah.
manage something else, and then it's like, oh, that wasn't charged correctly, and you got to fight them.
Yeah.
So I think it will change. I just don't know how. I mean,
Yeah.
it's going to be tough
The carve outs are important, but I've seen Amazon get it wrong all the time.
all the time. Like they
Especially
have to see it
if
figured
you'll
out.
recall, there used to be this random thing like if you removed a product, you couldn't get it, you couldn't ship it back in because
Oh yeah.
they didn't want people like returning stuff and sending it
Yep.
back in, and sometimes that would trigger and sometimes that wouldn't, and then like
Yep.
all sorts of issues.
Agreed.
Well, Rob, it's been a great conversation. Hearing some of the inner workings of Amazon. I'm sure we could have elaborated there even further. So I can't wait for your LinkedIn influencer post of like, guys, here's what's actually going on, and like make sure it's a thread with like 10. Threads are just like the way that you communicate nowadays, I guess.
Yep.
Well, thank you for sharing about what you guys are up to, Pattern, and Amazon internal. If people want to ask questions or they want to check out your middle mile program, how can they raise their hand and say, yeah?
Yeah. So we've designed them this new product, Middle Mile, it will go live. You can get to it on the Pattern website, pattern.com. You can actually go and sign up. We've tried to make it really easy for sellers. You can actually go connect your seller account. You get a quote right there. You can see your shipments. We'll actually pull your data from your seller account. You can get a live quote right there. You can put in your carton dimensions if you want to see it. We can do some estimations if we need, and you can sign up right through there and send us
Yeah.
1 carton or 1,000,000 cartons. We don't really care.
Based
So
off of the
pretty easy
speed
to sign
that
up.
based off the speed that you guys have done this, I think I want a few of your developers on my team.
We've got a great team. Like we did this very, very fast. So I'm really proud of the team.
Yeah.
We're very excited. But that
Yeah.
is the intent. The intent is to make it really simple. So
Yeah.
Pattern website. We're also going to be doing some stuff on LinkedIn. You'll be able to get like through Rob Hahn at Pattern. My email is rob.hahn@pattern.com. I don't know if I say this or not, but if you've got questions, our team is
Well,
super open to answering questions. We
yeah.
want to see this go big. So yeah, lots of
Cool.
ways in.
All right. Well, thank you, Rob, for coming on. And we'll wrap up there. Thanks, everyone. That's the pod, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
1, 2, 3.